Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me in welcoming to the stage the Honorable Senator from Oregon, Jeff Merkley.
I tell you what's so impressive about Senator Merkley, his timeliness. It's just unbelievable. No, it's just, this is the highlight of the conference. And I've talked about this at various times today to you, but of all sort of the new faces I wanted you to meet, Jeff Merkley's at the top of the list. He is one of my favorite senators, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, but one of the ones that despite frustrations with Congress, anger toward partisanship and inactivity, dealing with Jeff Merkley gives you hope for this country. I really mean that. He's that quality of an individual. If you read his official biography, it says it all, the first line. And that is, Jeff has spent his whole life fighting for opportunity for Oregon's families. His public service career began when he was an intern for one of my all-time favorite senators and one of my closest friends, and that's Mark Hatfield. We all remember Mark Hatfield, what a great man he was. Jeff Merkley holds the Hatfield seat. He has a Bachelor of Art from Stanford University and a Master's of Public Policy from the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton. He was selected the Presidential Management Fellow, worked on defense issues over at the Pentagon. He's worked in the Congressional Budget Office, a lot on nuclear weapons and policies and programs and military issues. But when he returned to Oregon in 1991, he served as executive director of Habitat for Humanity. That tells you what he cares about. Next, he served as director of housing development at Human Solutions, where he worked to make affordable housing affordable, and launched Oregon's first IDA accounts. In 2008, or in 2004, he was elected Speaker of the Oregon House of Representatives. In 2008, he was elected to the Senate. I think I met you in 2009, and our first conversation, Senator Merkley said to me, you know, I like that Community Services Block Grant. It was a program you knew as Speaker. It was a program that I saw the value of what it did for Oregon. And I got to tell you, David, I really like my Oregon Community Action Agencies. How refreshing it was to hear that. Thing about Jeff Merkley now and for many, many years in the future is behind closed doors with no lobbyist around, no television cameras, no outside special interest. If you had to go behind closed doors in which senators make a hard decision about what is best in America's interest and the values this country should have and what our priorities ought to be, the first person you want at the table is our speaker this afternoon. Please welcome Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon.
Thank you all. Well, thank you all so much for the enthusiastic reception, but really the thanks is from me to all of you for the incredible work you do on the ground, making our communities stronger, making our families stronger, improving the quality of lives. I just want to ask, do we have some folks from Oregon here? Hey, Oregonians, all right. They're doing great work. Can we tell Oregon how well they're doing? Good job, yes. No, when I became this last year the chair of a subcommittee, and it's the first time that I've been chair of anything in the U.S. Senate, It takes a couple years before that space opens up. I wanted my first hearing to be based on real voices from folks who are being impacted on the ground in America. And there is a film that the Gantz brothers had done about 8 families in Portland called American Winter. And these families were going along feeling like they had a solid foundation under them, and then in various ways, related either to the loss of jobs or the incursion of medical expenses, they were simply knocked off their foundations. And these families agreed for 6 months to have a camera in their face, and the result was fairly remarkable. I encourage you all to see this HBO documentary. But I invited several of these families to come and testify at that first hearing. So we had a panel of economists and a panel of families, and I think we learned more from the families than we did from the economists. And I know that you learn those stories and those lessons every single day about the real impact of what people are feeling across this nation. I was very struck in looking at some numbers regarding 2008 and the impact of the recession, that 60% of the jobs we lost were living wage jobs, and only 40% of the jobs we're getting back are living wage jobs. And that translates into millions of American families who are out there and thought they had the American dream in their hands, and now they're chasing part-time, low to no benefits, minimum wage or near minimum wage jobs, trying to somehow make that next rent check or that next home payment or that next heating bill. And they're showing up at the variety of programs that you all are sponsoring. And that's a long ways away from the American dream vision that is certainly ingrained in my mind about America as a land of opportunity where if you work hard, there is a bright future ahead. And that American dream concept, it's rooted certainly in our history. It's rooted in the vision of opportunity in our founding Constitution. If you have abundant resources, as America does, if you have a nation determined to shake off rigid class structures, which America does, if you have a nation with a government that is designed to be of the people, by the people, and for the people, as President Lincoln described our government, then with all of that, can you fail to have the conditions and the opportunity for every family to thrive? Well, the term American Dream comes from a historian who was writing in the Great Depression, and he wanted to title the book he was writing American Dream, but his editor said nobody would like that phrase. But he still used it. He still used it in his book, and he described it as, and this was James Truslow Adams, as a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone with opportunity for each. And I thought what's remarkable about that is he saw this vision for America at a point in which we were in the Great Depression. And the Great Depression was a powerful, powerful collapse of our economy, and families were at odds in all kinds of profoundly difficult ways. And I think back to the stories of my own family. My mother's mother lived in a boxcar and washed laundry by hand to get by. My father's family homesteaded and lost their homestead. And this was similar to stories for millions of families. But along came President Roosevelt and his allies, and they saw a vision, an opportunity for all, and started to rally America and invest in American families and develop new strategies, including the amortizing, humble home mortgage that we still have today. And indeed, then out of World War II, we had the growing middle class, the largest middle class the world has ever seen. And it certainly seemed like each generation would be able to build on the success of the previous generation. That's certainly the way my parents saw it, who went from growing up in very humble means to owning a 3-bedroom ranch house, being able to afford a vacation, being able to save some money, and be able to tell their son and daughter that if you go to college and we want you to do that, we'll be there to be able to help you pay for that. That it will be possible, that there is opportunity for you to fulfill your potential and to give back fully to society. Well, with that vision in mind, I became the first in my family to go to college. And I suspect, how many here are the first in their families to go to college? It's an enormously powerful transition in terms of the ability to gain skills and apply them, and many other pathways of career education and so forth. But to be able to gain those additional skills, whether career-oriented or college-oriented out of high school, it's a vision of opportunity. Now, right now, we are losing that vision of opportunity among our youth. A lot of them, and I live in a working class community, the same community that I grew up in, and I'm hearing parents talk about their deep fear of their children having a college debt the size of a home mortgage and not having a job that pays enough to make those payments. How many folks are worried about the price of college for your kids or your grandkids? Yeah, it's pretty much affecting all of us, isn't it? One of the things I'm advocating for is a completely different framework for thinking about college expenses. Yes, we should increase Pell Grants and keep pace with tuition inflation. And yes, we should keep interest rates very low on college loans. But the pay-it-forward concept basically is a concept to address the risk of being trapped between low monthly wages and high monthly payments on your loans. And it's that fear of being trapped that is causing many of our parents and many of our students to say they're not sure there is a path for them to succeed. So under Pay It Forward, you would get a Pay It Forward grant rather than a loan to pay your tuition. And then you would pledge 2 to 3% of your future income for, say, 20 years into the kitty for the next generation, thus the pay it forward concept. And so if your wages are low, your payments are very low, and if you are the next Bill Gates, you get the blessing of donating billions of dollars to help the next generation succeed. And then no one's trapped in that fashion. I think this idea deserves at least a pilot project, and I've introduced a bill to do that. We've got to try some very different approaches to restore the vision of opportunity for our students here in America. We have a lot of work to do in a lot of other areas. One of the areas that really bothered me was the impact upon the pathway for building wealth for middle-class families through home ownership, and indeed the introduction of teaser rate loans, where they were 3 or 4% loans that after 2 years went to 9 or 10%. These loans not only were wrong for the families because the families weren't going to be able to afford those payments at 9 or 10%. They were wrong for our broader economy because the securities that were based on them are the instruments of mass financial destruction that blew up our economy in 2008. So I tried, when I was Speaker of the House in Oregon, to pass a bill that outlawed these teaser rate loans by basically saying you couldn't do the prepayment penalty that makes that teaser possible, and banning the steering payments that were the undisclosed payments back to the loan originator. The person the family thought was their trusted financial advisor was actually getting a separate payment, thousands of dollars, to steer people into a predatory payday loan, predatory subprime loan when they qualified for a fully amortized prime loan. And so I had a bill in the Oregon legislature to say no prepayment penalties, no steering payments, and we passed it by one vote. But we didn't get it passed in the Oregon Senate. And the Oregon Senate said, you know, this would be unfair because it created a differential between state chartered institutions and federally chartered institutions. That's a fair point. I thought sometimes you just have to start somewhere. So I wish we had passed it, but that was the argument. But when I was elected to the U.S. Senate, I thought, I am going to do all I can to end those predatory loans. And so into Dodd-Frank, we got that ban on steering payments and prepayment penalties, and we've restored the integrity of the amortizing home loan. So it won't be a wealth stripping device, but a wealth building device for middle-class families. You know, we have more inequality now, and you see it every day, than we've had since 1928, since the Great Depression. By one metric, the new income since 2008, 95% of that has gone to the top 5%. That doesn't leave very much to be shared by everyone else. And when you look at the disappearance of middle-class jobs, it means we have to create more of those jobs. There is no foundation as solid for a family as a living wage job. And that means investments in manufacturing or nurturing manufacturing. It means investments in infrastructure. You know, we are spending a fraction of what other nations are spending on infrastructure. China is spending 10% of its GDP on infrastructure. I went to Beijing 10 years apart. First trip, it was bicycles. Second trip, I was on a bullet train going 200 miles per hour from Beijing. That's a phenomenal change, and that wasn't the only project they have. Those projects are happening all over their nation because they're investing 10% of their gross domestic product. Europe is investing 5% of its gross domestic product. But here in America, where we have vast amounts of post-World War II infrastructure to replace, we're only investing 2%. So we're not investing in the infrastructure for the economy of the future. We're not creating the jobs today that we could be creating today. We could create a lot of middle-class jobs through energy-saving retrofits of our existing buildings. I proposed 2 bills on this. One was the Rural Energy Savings Program to be done through rural electrical co-ops, and another was called Building Star, and for larger commercial buildings. And President Bill Clinton, former President Clinton, came into our caucus, and he spoke for 20 minutes about low-cost loans for energy-saving retrofits being the most powerful job creator, dollar for dollar, that you could possibly pursue. And as he's talking about the fact that you can't outsource any of these jobs overseas, and he's talking about the fact that the products that are used in energy retrofits are made here in America, 95% of them are made here, the whole time I'm sending him mind waves. I was hoping he would say, and 2 of those bills are sponsored by the freshman senator from Oregon. I didn't succeed in that. And I didn't succeed in getting Building Star passed. I'm still working on it. But Rural Energy Savings Program that will be done through rural electrical co-ops did pass the Senate twice, made it into the Farm Bill, made it to the Oval Office, and that's being implemented as we speak. Now, today I was very upset in committee. We had testimony that Sherrod Brown arranged a subcommittee hearing in banking, and it basically had payday loan industry and payday loan reformers. And in Oregon, I championed the elimination of payday loans. I championed it. I championed it in 1999 and lost, and in 2001 and lost, and in 2003 and lost. There's a pattern here. 2005 I lost, and then in 2007 I was speaker, and I won. It kind of works like that. It's a little easier to pass legislation when you're in charge. And we put a cap on the interest rates that went up to 500+%, 700%. We put a cap of 36%, which still is high. But the real difference was realized when I walked into a food bank, and the woman directing the food bank said, the first thing I have to say to you is we no longer have families coming in here because they've been driven into bankruptcy and destitution by payday loans. That's a success. Let's talk about something near and dear to your hearts and my heart, community service block grants. Now, this is the combined power of the federal treasury and the frontline knowledge that all of you possess as community action agencies. And out in Oregon, we have projects that range through the spectrum, veterans and housing and emergency food and job training and health care and counseling, weatherization. We even have, through this program, a 8-acre farm that is a county's project to simultaneously create a connection to the land, teach discipline and understanding of the food system, nutrition, and business management all in one effort, and it's a spectacular called Youth Source program. Anybody here involved in Youth Source? No. Okay. Well, I was going to highlight it for you, but since you're not here. You all are looking in your community and thinking about what is the strategy that's going to be most effective. And that type of local understanding and input is significant, but you've got to have the resources behind it. And so I was taking a look at the resources since 2009. You know, in 2009 and 2010, we had $700 million in this federal program each year, plus an extra $1 billion for those 2 years through the ARRA Stimulus Act. And I'm sure you got to do some extra projects during that period of time. But then we went along with less, and then less, even more less, even less. And hit that low in 2013 fiscal year, $635 million, the impact of the sequester. You know, the sequester is a product of the Budget Control Act. The Budget Control Act basically was this deal. We are going to make a bet on bipartisan, bicameral cooperation, and if that bet loses, we're going to create a diabolical instrument for America that nobody would want. And that's going to be the law if the bet fails. Well, I voted against that bet. You know that Budget Control Act and the resulting sequester cut all kinds of programs for working Americans, for families and the foundation under those families, without cutting one slim dime for the most fabulously funded tax credit donations that go to the big oil companies. That is not right, and we have not been able to change that yet. Now, the president's budget proposes for this upcoming year cutting essentially this program in half and moving it into some other areas that would be concentrated in a few spots around the country, manufacturing centers. And I don't disagree that manufacturing is important. I argue for that all the time, but not at the expense of the many, many points of light and help that happen throughout our country through the Community Services Block Grant. So I'm leading a letter that will disagree dramatically with the administration. I know many of my colleagues will get on board. I think as you talk to them, please ask them to join this letter in the Senate and an equivalent one on the House side. So at a minimum, we can keep the program we have and hopefully expand it, as it certainly merits doing. There is nothing I would like to see more than having every community in America growing and truly becoming that land that James Truslow Adams envisioned, where life is better and richer and fuller for everyone with opportunity for each. You're all helping to build that vision. Thank you for doing so, and thank you for inviting me.